Welcome back to the Wide Right Podcast. Manny Navarro here from The Athletic, joined once again by Carlos Ledo of the MIA All Day Pod. It is Thursday, October 10th, right around 10:30 a.m. Carlos, we just had Hurricane Milton blow through the state of Florida. Some scary pictures coming around from different parts of the state. You saw Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg, Tampa area. The roof is completely annihilated up there. I know people were dealing with tornadoes even here on the East Coast in Palm Beach. Scary stuff. Hope you guys made it through the storm fine. We did here. We're very fortunate here in West Broward to get away with no damage.
Yeah, thankfully we did. Northwest Miami did. We're okay. Just want to say to everybody, listen, if you can, whatever you could spare, whatever you can do, to help not only the Hurricane Milton victims, but also Hurricane Helene, whether it's donations of canned goods, donations of money, time, whatever you can do, those of us that are fortunate enough not to be in the storm's path and to be able to have the blessing of being able to give and being able to wake up today and not have any damage to our homes and our property, we should pay that forward to the people that are suffering through this terrible storm. So if you can, man, whatever you can do it for those people.
For sure. A lot of people affected by it. Have friends that live in the Orlando area, lost power, a lot of water around his house and where he lives. And, everybody across the state was affected the way this thing just sort of cut through. We just hired a new writer at The Athletic, Matt Baker, who worked for, St. Pete Times for a long, long time as a college football writer. First week on the job, he's got a hurricane coming barreling through his neighborhood. So, hopefully everything with Matt turned out well. I checked in with him this morning. He said he was fine, him and his family, a little bit of damage to the house, etc., that kind of stuff. But looks like he's going to make it out all right. Hoping to get power back in his neighborhood sometime soon. But you're right, there's a lot of people affected by this, and hopefully everything turns out well. Not to start our show on such a somber, sort of sad thing to talk about, but the Hurricanes are at the midseason point, Carlos. No game this weekend. They get a bye week. They are 6-0. And to be honest with you, it's been a crazy 2 week span here the last 2 weeks. The comeback at Cal was absolutely scintillating. Come back from 35-10. I came over to your house. We were watching it together there in your backyard. And when they fell behind 35-10, I looked at you and I said, well, I got to go home because I got to do a show with Big O at 2 in the morning. Sort of a post-game synopsis of probably a terrible loss. And so I drove home in the middle of third quarter, get home, turn the TV on, and it's 35 or 38-18 heading into the fourth quarter. And then you and I obviously both stayed up to watch the end of that game. Just your thoughts on that comeback itself and what
Yeah,
an
my
incredible
thoughts
game.
are that you're a jinx and you're never coming over again this season. So or if you do come over and they start losing, you're immediately leaving.
There
So
you go. That's it.
yeah, I'm just happy there's no game this week because I don't know if my heart can take another comeback victory and dealing with a Hail Mary or another non-call or last second play there at the end. It's just been wild the last couple weeks, man. To me, the impressive thing is you see how, the team sputters, the team falters, and this is something that would normally snowball over the last few seasons and get worse over time, and they wouldn't be able to fight out of it. But they just stick with it, and I think that's a testament not only to the change in the culture of the program, but to Cam Ward, because Cam Ward keeps believing. He keeps not caring as to what the score is. He keeps going out there and competing and little by little chipping away. And before you know it, he gets you back in the game and then you win.
Yeah, what's incredible to me is how infectious that spirit is, right? We call it nonchalant or just very casual, right? Even after the pick six, you didn't necessarily see panic in his face. It was like, all right, we're gonna come back and win this, and I just a phenomenal performance. Look, another game wrapped in controversy because of the at the end because of a non-targeting call on Wesley Bissainthe that, frankly, I mean, when you watch that play and you slow it down, once again, it looks like maybe officials got it wrong, right? Or
Yeah.
Miami caught a break. Here's what I would say to everybody who's criticizing this Miami Hurricanes team. Keep bringing that hater fuel because it's working. I don't know what it is, but everybody who's rooting against Miami, it's sort of bringing back those old feelings, Carlos. A lot of people not happy to see Miami prevail with a win. It's good thing. It seems to be working for the Canes.
It brings back the nostalgia of what it was like when the Hurricanes were dominating college football and everyone wanted to see them lose. Everybody wanted to see them falter. And now because of the echo chamber of Twitter and social media, you get to hear it even more than you did before, because before you just had to rely on sports radio, newspapers, national TV, whatever you would see. Now you get to see it almost instantaneously as it's happening in real time, right? So it's
Right.
fun to watch, it's fun to see. Hopefully they continue that. And you know what? Talking about Cam Ward, they make a lot of comparisons about Cam Ward about, who they remind him of or who he reminds people of. To me, it's an odd comparison, but his attitude and his just being unfazed by turnovers reminds me of Brett Favre. He's a gunslinger. Like he goes out there and he'll just keep slinging the ball. He throws a pick six. He doesn't care. He's going to come back and throw it down the field on you again. He's got that kind of an attitude.
And now you're seeing people in other sports and in other realms of life using the whole,
Yeah.
celebration. The Panthers, NHL Stanley Cup champions, open up this week, and you see fans in the stands as they're scoring goals to beat the Boston Bruins, doing the same, Cam Ward Selly, as they like to call it. And it's pretty remarkable. And people, like I
And
said,
should the Dolphins now go in the can for Cam?
right. It's a good question. We'll see what the Dolphins ultimately end up doing. But Ward is definitely in the Heisman conversation. He's being talked about nationally as potentially the best quarterback in college football. But
And you know what? Let me say this about him. There is one thing that's not mentioned enough about Cam Ward, and I think it's been the biggest difference in the comebacks the last couple of weeks. He is checking plays at the line of scrimmage late
mhm,
in games a lot, and those are the plays that are resulting in big plays and big scores and things of that nature. I think his ability to see what the defense is doing and change the play at the line of scrimmage and get them into the right play and the right uh, route is making a huge difference for the Hurricanes, and I think that's what's leading them back in the end. And I think that's part of maybe there was a little you saw earlier in the game, him and I pointed out to you that him and Dawson were sort of like he was chirping back at Dawson a little bit, and I think when Cam decides, listen, forget this, I'm going to take over in terms of the play calling, I'm going to check us into the right route pattern. This is what we're going to do. He sort of takes over the game, and it's amazing that they've given him the freedom to do that, and that he has the ability to do that at a level where he's actually understanding what the defense is doing at that level and taking advantage of whatever they're giving him.
yep, for sure. Look, I want us to do a mid-season review. I know you have some stats and some numbers. We're going to do our mailbag like we always do. We got fans very, very excited about this team that want to send some questions in our way that we're going to get to. But I thought one cool way of getting into our mid-season review here, Carlos, was to kind of go back to our August 15th podcast, our preseason episode before they played the Gators. When I floored you, when I said that I was picking Miami to win the ACC and earn a top four seed in the college football playoff. I said Ward would be the biggest reason. So he's got a chip on his shoulder, wants to prove himself. And you were wondering who had taken over my body.
Yeah.
Now Miami is number seven, or what are they, sixth or seventh now in the country? Six maybe according to AP. And the statistical numbers are just absolutely through the roof. Second in points per game, 47.7 points per game. They're number one in yards per play as an offense, 8.15 yards per play. This has been a team that's thrown the ball a lot more than you and I thought they would. 234 passing attempts, 196 rushing attempts. I thought it'd be closer to 50-50 again. But I wanted to go over some of the over-under lines. But when I give you those numbers and I say they're averaging close to 48 points a game and over 8 yards a play, and they're number one and number two in the country in those categories, am I crazy now to say that Miami's going to win the ACC and compete for a national championship?
Well, I didn't think you were crazy because you said it, because it was a possibility. I thought you were crazy because you've never said anything like that about the Hurricanes in the entire time I've known you. But
Right.
you haven't had a reason to. Um, we talked about this on the pod for the last 3 years that to beat elite, you have to be at that 40 plus points per game on offense and 500 yards a game on offense as well. And right now the Hurricanes are at 47 plus, 583, almost 584 per game on offense. They're playing at an elite level offensively. The problem is the last couple of weeks now that they've got into conference play, we know it's a different animal. And we know it's a different animal for various reasons that we discussed. Number one, there's a lot more tape now in this Hurricanes offense and defense that teams are going to be able to take advantage of.
Yep.
Two, they're running up against teams that are more familiar with them and their personnel, and they're able to adjust a little bit better. And the level of competition, frankly, increases. So they're having a hell of a season. It's been great to watch. But I think things are going to get a little stiffer in terms of the competition. And speaking of some of the stats that I put together, one of the things that I looked at was I looked at the first five FBS opponents, looked at what their records were the margin of victory for the Hurricanes during those games, the points allowed and points for those teams, to see what that looks like. And the average for those first five opponents, their average record is basically 2-3, right? If you round it.
Yeah.
Their average points per game is 28 roughly, which ranks on average 77th in the country. Their points allowed is 29.2, which ranks about 74th in the country on average.
Hmm.
And the Hurricanes' margin of victory for the first three opponents of those, Florida State, Ball State, USF, was 40 points a game. Now over the last two, it's only 2.5, with
Right.
5 points split between Cal and Virginia Tech.
Hmm.
Looking ahead, you're looking at a teams that are basically going to flip it a little bit. It's going to be 3-2, the average record right now,
Hmm.
29.6 in terms of points per game, which ranks about 62nd, 23 in terms of points allowed, which is about 62nd also. So the opponents get a little bit tougher moving forward, and that's really driven down by Florida State in terms of their numbers.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with conference opponents, you're dealing with better opponents. Now it's time to see if the Hurricanes can take this bye week, fix what they got going on, and take it to the next level. Because to be elite and to really compete for a national championship or really make noise in the playoffs, they're going to have to fix that defense and fix some of the holes they're having on offense.
No question. There's things to be fixed, and we'll get into all of that. But I thought a fun way to do this, in terms of where they are mid-season wise, is to look at some of the numbers and predictions that you and I made, and call ourselves out when we're right, and maybe say, hey, we were right about this.
I
Uh,
don't believe you're only doing this because your predictions are so good and so on point that you're probably going to look pretty good, and I'm going to look like shit. But that's
no,
okay.
no, no, no. I mean, we did this together. If you want to go back and listen to the August 15th show, go ahead. You can hear everything. I didn't listen to the whole show again, but I took notes from some of the things that you and I said
And
regarding
I appreciate that
statistical
because
leaders.
I barely remember what I ate for breakfast. So this is going to be interesting.
All right, for passing yards for the season, you and I projected that Cam Ward would finish under 3,800 yards. We did the math. We basically took his numbers and said times 14, his numbers from last year. We said times 14, he should get to about 3,800 yards. Right now, Cam Ward is on pace for 4,400 yards. He's averaging almost 370 yards passing per game. He's got 2,219 passing yards through his first six games. So, we both said the under. Are we ready to say that we were wrong about that? He's gonna probably throw for over 3,800 yards.
Yeah, I would say yes, the way he's going right now, and especially if they continue to need to rely on him more than the running game, it's definitely going to go over 3,800. Definitely going to go, probably going to go over that 4,000 mark.
We said Cam Ward would. I said Cam Ward would throw 30 touchdowns this year. You agreed with me, at least 30. He had 25 last season for Washington State. Through six games, Cam Ward, 20 touchdown passes, the most among all FBS passers in college football. What do you think he finishes with at this point, Carlos?
Man, I think he's probably going to finish in that. I'd say probably 36 to 40 range.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's going to definitely pass the 30 that we came up with. I would say overall, I mean, if we're going to do a grade, and I want us to go position by position and give a grade, I think it's pretty obvious. The quarterback position has been an A plus,
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt.
even with the five picks and some of those moments. I give him an A plus because Miami is 6-0 because of Cam Ward in a
Yeah,
lot
and
of
not only
ways.
that, not only the passing, but if you take out the sack numbers, his rushing numbers are incredibly impressive as well. I think he's got over 200 yards rushing if you take out the
Yep.
sack numbers.
And three touchdowns. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's been dominant. And those touchdowns have been huge. From a rushing perspective, and we have different numbers and things I can share here with you because I did an entire breakdown of the whole conference. But just to compare a couple of things here. Last year with Tyler Van Dyke, he finished third in the ACC in QB rating, completing 65.8% of his passes. 8.1 yards per carry, which was third in the conference. Tyler's completion percentage was number one in the conference, 19 touchdowns, 12 picks. He only ran for 84 yards total in terms of not taking out the sacks. If you compare Cam Ward and Tyler Van Dyke at this point, Ward already has more touchdown passes. He's averaging 10.4 yards per pass attempt. His completion percentage is 69%, which is full three points more. His QBR is almost 40 points higher than Tyler Van Dyke. It is a stark contrast. And if you look at it, Tyler Van Dyke technically he's top three in a lot of categories there in the ACC.
Yep.
That just shows you that you went from a pretty good quarterback in the ACC, even with the picks, even with his mistakes, to an elite quarterback. And that's
Yep.
why the offense I mean, you compare the offense scoring wise, ready? 31.5 points per game last year. That was third in the ACC. They are number two in the country in scoring right now, 47.7 points per game. It's incredible, but that's the difference. When you have friends that say, "What's the difference with the Hurricanes?" It's the quarterback, dude.
Yeah, not even close.
It's basically that. Yards per play. I mean, 6.4 yards per play. Miami was second in the ACC last year in yards per play in the offense. 6.4. They're up to 8.15. That's first in the country. I mean, it's just astronomical jump. And the scoring differential, through the first six games, they're beating opponents by close to 29 points a game. Last year, their scoring differential was 8.7 points when you went up for the whole season. So, uh, I don't know any other way to say it, but the quarterback makes all the difference.
It's essentially the jump between 2018 Joe Burrow for LSU and 2019 Joe Burrow for LSU. That's the huge difference. That's what you're
Hmm.
seeing in terms of the jump in terms of play. You know, in 18 Burrow had 2,800 yards, almost 2,900, 16 touchdowns, five picks. And then the following year, he goes absolutely bananas and it has 50, almost 5,700 yards passing and 60 touchdowns. And
Yeah.
LSU runs away with the national title. So that's what we're looking at in terms of offensive jump.
And if here's a telling stat. One of my favorite stats is big plays, 20, explosive plays, 20 plus
Yep.
yard plays. Last year as a team, Miami had 68 plays of 20 yards or more. That was through 13 games, including the bowl game. Right now they've got 53, the most in the country. They're only 15 behind last year's number. If you double what they have right now, 53 through the regular season, they'll have 106 big plays. Again, like that is the difference with this team.
Yep.
There's no other way around it. All right. Let's get to rushing because I think a lot of us feel like this team is not running the football as well as you'd hoped. Um, Certainly Damian Martinez is not hitting some of the benchmarks that we thought he would. But before we get to Damian Martinez, I'm just going to give you some baseline numbers. Miami is fourth in the ACC in rushing yards per game, 183 yards per game. They are averaging 5.6 yards per carry, which makes them third in the ACC. So they are top four in rushing yards per game and rushing yards per attempt. Last year, they averaged 173 rushing yards per game, which was seventh in the league, and 5.1 yards per carry, which was second. So they're above the pace that they had for last year. Again, the schedule is going to get tougher. You mentioned that. But technically, their numbers are better than last year, even if we all sort of sit here and watch and say, well, they're not running the ball maybe as good as last year. Your thoughts on that perspective, Carlos?
Sure. I think one of the things that we're noticing is they got a lot of those yards against some of the lesser opponents that they had the last couple of weeks. I mean, Virginia Tech, they did a little bit better job running the football. But we're seeing that it's not as explosive as we thought it was going to be in the run game, and they're
Hmm.
having to rely on Cam Ward a lot to
Right.
bring it back, and that's why he's throwing the ball so much. I think now the trend that's been uncovered is they tend to run the ball better with AJ Allen and Mark Fletcher in there, and specifically Mark Fletcher than Damian Martinez. And I think
Right.
the reason why is those guys are a little bit more decisive in terms of when they decide to put their foot on the ground and attack the line of scrimmage, as opposed to Damian Martinez, who tends to dance a little bit before he likes to choose a lane and start attacking the line of scrimmage.
Hmm.
For just looking at the numbers offensively, Mark Fletcher has only 73 fewer yards than Damian Martinez on almost 30 carries less. He's got 29 less carries.
Right.
He's got the same amount of 10 plus yard runs as Damian Martinez with less carries. And his yards per contact is 3.89 against Martinez's 2.95. And they both have forced nine missed tackles. So to me, that's telling me that Mark Fletcher is having a better year, that he's a better back for apparently this system, this offensive line and the way they're blocking things. I think this line is not blowing people off the ball like you thought they would in terms of the run game, but they are holding their blocks long enough to create enough creases for somebody who's decisive to get up in there and attack and make plays. I think Martinez is the type of guy that needs to be able to have an offensive line that's sort of dominating and plowing forward for him to really pick his way and take his time. So I think that's the difference in terms of the two backs. But I think eventually they'll figure it out. I think if they give Allen and Fletcher more carries and sort of maybe relegate Martinez to a third back, it'll work out. I think they'll get more out of the run game. I don't think they're going to do that, but that would probably be the answer.
Martinez ranks 16th in the ACC in yards per game. He's averaging just under 50 yards per game. Last year, Henry Parrish led the Hurricanes. He averaged 56 yards per game. In terms of missed tackles, how elusive Damian Martinez is, he's 22nd in the ACC, nine missed tackles forced. Last year, Henry Parrish finished the season with 23 missed tackles forced, which was 24th in the league. So I think the interesting question going forward, and maybe we debate this some point in the mailbag. I haven't looked at what questions have come in, but um, I think the question is, what does Miami ultimately do over the second half of the season? Do they continue to hand the ball to Martinez and make him the lead back, or does somebody like Mark Fletcher overtake him? I think the way Mark Fletcher ran the ball against Cal certainly gives you a feeling of maybe things change. And I sort of said that in the preseason. I said
Yep.
I thought that as the season would go on, Mark Fletcher would be utilized more and more and more as he got healthier and healthier and fully recovered from that season, from that injury at the end in the bowl game. So I think we're starting to see that now. I think as we get into ACC play, especially the game at Louisville. Against a Louisville defense, it's pretty good. Carlos Louisville's run defense ranks eighth in the ACC, but overall, they're one of the better defenses in the league. And I think you look at Martinez, and as you said, the way he runs the ball versus the way Fletcher runs the ball, I think we could start to see a shift as the season goes on.
Yeah, and talking about the running the game, running the football, game to game, the most impressive runner the last couple of games has been Cam Ward.
Yeah,
He on the season, his yards after contact average is 5.24 yards. It's more than Martinez and Fletcher.
yeah,
And he's forced eight missed tackles, and he's got nine 10+ yard runs which leads the team. So
yeah.
talking about Cam Ward doing it all, he's basically, like I said, he's 2020 De'Aaron King on steroids.
Martinez, before the season, I said he'd get to 1,000 yards. You said he'd get to 1,200 yards. He's at 292 right now.
Not
Do
gonna happen.
you think Miami has 1,000 yard rusher this year? I say no
No,
at this point.
no,
Yeah.
no.
We said Martinez. You said Martinez would get to 10 touchdowns. I went crazy. I said he'd get to 15. He's got five rushing touchdowns right now. I think there's a chance he gets to your mark. I don't think there's any
Yeah.
chance he gets to mine.
Also because he's been a touchdown vulture,
Yeah.
getting down to the goal line and they hand it off to him right there.
Yeah, let's get to receiver where Xavier Restrepo has continued to be an elite playmaker. We talked about the catch on his butt to help Miami on fourth down to get past Virginia Tech, and then last week, uh, you know, two huge fourth down catches, including fourth and 10.
And a huge first catch to start the drive and the game
Yes,
drive.
continues to be exceptional. You and I felt he would lead the team in receiving this year with 70 catches. That was our preseason prediction. If you look at who's leading the team in catches right now, Restrepo has the most catches, 32 catches. He leads the team in receiving yards as well, 585 yards, and he leads the team in receiving touchdowns with five. Isaiah Horton, though, who you thought would lead the team in receiving touchdowns, Carlos, he is right behind Xavier in terms of production, 31 catches, 395 yards, three scores. I voted Sam Brown and Jacoby George to lead the team in receiving yards. And I think you
I
went
said
with
Restrepo.
you said Restrepo would lead in receiving yards. Just to know some of their numbers, George has 21 catches, 290 yards and three scores, and Brown has 21 catches, 246 yards and a score. My pick for leading the team in receiving touchdowns was Jacoby George with eight. You said Isaiah Horton. So at this point, are we going to change our picks for the rest of the season? Who do you think leads the team in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns?
I'm sticking with Restrepo for receptions and receiving yards, and I'm going to stick with Horton with touchdowns.
Okay.
He's turned into quite the weapon.
Yeah.
And I think as time goes on, especially now in ACC play, I think teams are going to start trying to rotate coverage over to Restrepo
Hmm.
and try and stop him from getting in the end zone. And I think eventually, once you get down that goal line, that red zone area, they're going to try and stop that pick play they like to run with Restrepo, which is the pick fade play to the back cone.
Right.
And they're going to have to use Horton's size to score. And I think overall, I think Horton's going to make some bigger plays down the stretch as he continues to get comfortable with the offense and they continue to target him.
Yeah, I think your initial premise that Horton would become the second best receiver on the team is right. I was wrong. I thought it would be Sam Brown or Jacoby George, and each of them have had their issues. I mean, this team has had a bunch of different drops. I didn't look at all the PFF numbers.
I've got him
Uh,
here if you want him.
Go ahead. Who's leading the team in drops? They got that there
So,
for you?
yeah, Sam Brown and Jacoby George both lead the team in drops. Sam Brown's got four, Jacoby George has two. In terms of the reception percentage, that means the percentage of times they come down with the football with a reception as compared to being targeted. The leaders are Xavier Restrepo with 74.4% and Isaiah Horton with 79.5%. So they have a huge number in terms of uh, receptions when targeted. Brown and George are 61.8 and 63.6% respectively. Actually, the one with the highest, believe it or not, the highest reception percentage on the team is Elijah Arroyo with 82.4%.
Wow. Brown is tied for the lead in the ACC in drops, by the way, if you're wondering. He's Jaden Lane, the guy from Virginia Tech who tried to come up with that catch in the end zone, I think, or he actually scored a touchdown against Miami. He's tied up there with him. Kyle Morlock from Florida State and Bryson Nesbitt from North Carolina. So Sam Brown, I thought he would be better than he's turned out to be for Miami, just because of some of the things I was hearing in the preseason and the way Cam Ward talked about him, especially being able to win one-on-one coverage, etc. I'm not saying Sam Brown isn't a good player. I just think he hasn't been as good as I thought he would.
Yeah, I think he's disappointed a little bit, and I think you sort of have now replaced him with Isaiah Horton in terms of snaps, and I think it should continue that way.
We'll see what happens going forward. Tight end position, obviously, you've gotten a lot of good production out of Elijah Arroyo. We talked about this on previous shows. They've already eclipsed what they did a year ago. I think the one thing that you've pointed out over and over again is we haven't seen as much of the ninth year guy blocking out there and setting the tone on the edge. The other Cam McCormick. And I'm interested to see what adjustments Miami's offensive coordinator and coaching staff make here in the second half of the season? Do they go to more of that to try to get, better protection for Cam or to free up the running game?
Yeah, and I think you've even seen more of Elijah Loft than you have
Hmm.
Cam McCormick this season, which is
Yeah.
which is interesting. So to me, we talked about it all last year. I think production in the passing game out of the tight end and the running backs was sorely missing. And I'm glad that they've been able to sort of not only go to Elijah Arroyo, but Riley Williams has made some plays this year at the tight end position, which is nice to see. And just to give you some numbers on Arroyo, he leads the team with 20.4 yards per reception.
Wow.
That's
That's
incredible.
it's really, really, really impressive. All right. I want to get to the offensive line and some of these numbers because I think we can all agree they have not been as good as last year's unit, and I have the numbers to back it up. But I think we also need to take note of the fact that Jalen Rivers, your starting left tackle and arguably the best offensive lineman in the ACC, only played against the Gators. And you also lost your starting left guard, Ryan Rodriguez, at least in that game. The coaching staff felt good about Ryan. So the left side of the line has been completely different from what maybe the coaching staff wanted it to be coming out of the preseason. But here's some numbers. According to Pro Football Focus, Miami ranks 10th in the ACC in terms of offensive line pass blocking efficiency. 10th in the ACC. A year ago, they were third. Um, Pressures allowed, Miami ranks 15th out of 17 ACC teams, 53 pressures allowed. Last year, they were second, 73 pressures allowed. So they're almost there in terms of
Yeah.
pressures allowed. And then sacks allowed, Miami has allowed six, which makes them ninth in the ACC in terms of most sacks allowed. Last year, they allowed 11 as a unit to finish fifth in the league. So, your thoughts on the offensive line, and when you see those numbers, do you think they deserve as much blame, or does Cam Ward holding on to the football too long maybe deserve some of that?
I think some of that is on Cam Ward, obviously hanging on to the ball and trying to make plays, running around the pocket. But some of that is also, especially with the last few games, the offensive line has just been straight gotten beat in terms of pressures created by the defense. There are a couple plays, I think, in a row where you saw Zach Carpenter, the center, just getting destroyed up front and getting pushed back into Cam Ward almost. To this point, they've given up, Inez Cooper's given up 2 sacks. Markel Bell and his limited play has given up 2 sacks. Carpenter's given up 2 sacks. All of last year, the guys that gave up the most sacks were Francis Mauigoa with 5 and Jalen Rivers with 3.
Yeah,
So we're already talking about these guys that are about to go over last year's numbers in terms of what they gave up in sacks and pressures. Markel Bell is his pass blocking grade from PFF is 59.6, and he's given up 13 pressures. And
yeah,
he leads the team in penalties also with 4. That's not good. And as Cooper, his run blocking has been, below average. So it's not just the left side of the line of scrimmage. His run blocking grade is 56.7. And the O-line as a whole, their run blocking grade is 62.3. So you're seeing that they're not generating the type of holes that we talked about. They're also struggling a little bit in the passing game, but they're still scoring a ton of points and getting the ball down the field and moving the ball, which is a testament to Cam Ward.
yeah. I think, like you said, Ward certainly deserves some of the blame for those sacks, and he also, I think, deserves a lot of credit for making up for some bad blocking that he's gotten in front of him. It
Yep.
hasn't always been great. That said, they are running for more yards per game on the ground. They got a higher rushing percentage. So you can take it for what it's worth. I think offensive line is one of those things that it's more about what you see with the naked eye versus maybe what some of the PFF numbers and all of that say. That said, Francis Mauigoa is the highest graded offensive lineman on the team. He's 14th in the ACC, according to guys who have played at least 20% of their team's snaps. Uh, if you look at tackles, he's one, two, three, four, five, six. He's the seventh best offensive tackle in the league. The next highest graded Hurricane is center Zach Carpenter, 31st among all offensive linemen. Um, and then Matthew McCoy is third in terms of the best grade. He's 52nd in the ACC. So right tackle, center, left guard in terms of what Pro Football Focus grades out in terms of performance. So let's to review. We gave A plus for quarterback. What are you giving running back? What are you giving receiver? What are you giving offensive line?
I'm giving running backs B minus.
Okay.
I think there's room to improve there. I think the offensive line, I'm giving them a C plus.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've got a lot of room to improve.
And receiver?
Receiver, I'm going to give them A minus.
I'm with you. I think on all those grades. Yeah, I'm pretty much aligned with you when I think
And
about
tight
it.
end A because they've over eclipsed anything they had done up to this point over the last few years.
Yeah. Let's flip to defense because we've talked a lot about Shannon Dawson's unit and how good they've been because of Cam Ward. Defensively, comparing some numbers here, Miami is fourth in the ACC in terms of points allowed, 18.8 per game. A year ago, they were sixth in the ACC, giving up 22.8 points per game. So they've made an improvement there in allowing fewer points. In terms of yards per play, Miami is third in the ACC, 4.86 yards per play. Last year, they were fifth in the ACC, 5.17. So improvement there in yards per play. The issue's just been the big play, Carlos. They gave up 4 plays of 50 yards or more against Cal. We've seen the blown assignments. I think it was Popo Aguirre who forgot to cover Jaden Ott out of the backfield. There were other moments where you're just like, where's the coverage? Where's the guy supposed to be? I think that is what we knew the Achilles heel would be coming into this season, and it's shown up the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of the same sort of inverse for the offense and the defense. When the offense struggles, it's because they're not able to run the football, and defenses are getting pressure on Cam Ward and getting sacks and forcing him to get rid of the football before he wants
Yeah.
to. So when they finish those pressures, the offense struggles. Defensively, when the pressure doesn't get there on the quarterback, they struggle tremendously because the secondary is exposed. But you're also seeing over the last couple weeks a trend of missed tackles that you hadn't seen before from this team. So Kiko Mauanoa has 8 missed tackles this season. He had 10 all of last season.
Yeah.
So that's an incredible stat. His current tackle grade is a 50.4 compared to last year's 71.9. So that's, you're looking at something that's a big swing in terms of production for a guy that you rely on as, if not one of your best defensive players, definitely one of your defensive leaders. Coverage wise, you're having a guy in Daryl Porter Jr. who last year was their best cover guy at 80.2 in terms of coverage grade. So far this season, 58.6. And you've definitely seen a step down in terms of the play in the secondary from the safeties when compared to a year ago. Mish Powell is tied with Kiko with 8 missed tackles. His tackle grade is a 36.3. Jaden Harris has a 59.4 tackle grade, and his coverage grade is a 60.4, which is not very good. And Jadaeus Harris, a 57.2 cover grade, OJ Frederic a little bit better at 69.6, and Deani Hill 66.1. So you're seeing guys struggle there in the secondary. And again, it's a factor of the last few weeks not being able to get pressure on the quarterback as much as you thought they would, or
Yep.
they had early on. But you saw the difference in the fourth quarter, right? In that second half, once they started getting after the quarterback and be able to apply pressure, they were able to shut down Cal's offense.
And really, it comes down to that. We felt if this front seven can be effective, then this defense can be better than average. When they are not getting pressure on the quarterback and they're not wrapping up in the open field and missing tackles, then they can be beaten and look bad. And I think that's what we've seen the last 2 weeks, and that's probably what we're going to see going forward. This is just the character of this defensive unit. It's the way that it was built. We've talked about how Miami needs to recruit better cornerbacks, how they need to upgrade at certain positions like safety and get better players. It just hasn't happened yet, and that's part of this process. This is why we're still in year three, and why we're seeing some of these issues pop up. It
Hey,
takes
it's
time.
like going shopping, right? You're going to Publix and you're
Yeah,
like, listen, man, I really need to buy some meat for the week, but I also need like some Vienna sausages because I want to make
yeah,
something chichas. But I just don't have enough money for all of it. So your budget is allocated more towards the meatier stuff,
yeah.
and you sort of skimp on the other things.
Yeah. Well, that said, there's still statistical improvements. Again, last year you had 13 games. Right now we got a 6 game sample size. So we're halfway to the total. But opponent quarterback rating, Miami is third in the ACC. That's pass as a pass defense. Last year they finished fifth. That's over 17 points lower. Completion percentage. Last year they gave up 56.8%. That was fifth best in the ACC. This year, seventh best, 56.1. Yards per play allowed in terms of passing defense, 6.2 a year ago, 7.1. They're second right now. They were sixth last year. And I think really the difference is they're getting more picks, Carlos. They're forcing turnovers, which is what's helped their number out. They've got 10 picks, only 5 touchdown passes allowed. Last year, it was 16 touchdowns allowed and 12 picks for the season. So you're 2-1 in interceptions versus last year where you had 16 touchdowns, 12 picks. So
Which again is crazy. We're talking about the running game sucking or not being as good as they should, and the offense is scoring a shit ton of points and getting a bunch of yards
right,
per game. And the
right.
defense is disappointing a bit in the secondary, and they're second in the country in interceptions. It's wild. It's weird.
It is weird, but it shows you that sometimes if you're just opportunistic on defense and you can kill a drive by forcing a turnover, that's going to make your
Yeah.
unit overall look a whole lot better. I didn't get into third down. Red zone efficiency on offense. Just a quick note, a side note. Third down, they're number one in the country. All right,
Yep.
on third down offense, they were fourth in the ACC last year. They're converting at 60% on offense, 41% last year. The red zone touchdown percentage, they're scoring touchdowns when they get in the red zone, 72, close to 73% of the time, which is third in the ACC. Last year, they were 10th. That's a big reason on offense
Yep.
why they're better. On the defensive perspective, they're third in the ACC on third down defense. They're giving up conversions on close to 31%. Last year, they were sixth on third down defense. They were close to 36% conversion. And then in red zone touchdown percentage, in terms of how often do they give up touchdowns in the red zone, Miami's only doing that 46% of the time. That's third in the ACC. Last year, it was over 54%, which was fifth. So they're doing a better job when it comes to third down defense and red zone defense. But again, the competition level is going to go up. And I think that's certainly important to note. And then in
And
terms of
to your
yeah,
point, the defensive touchdowns they're giving up are mostly on big plays.
they are 100%. As a run defense, they are third in the ACC, 89.67 yards per game. Last year they were second, 105.6. Again, that's a bigger sample size, and once you play conference games, you're gonna give up more yardage. And then yards per carry, they're sixth in the ACC this year. Last year they were tied for first with Louisville, 3.3 yards per carry. This year they're giving up 3.3, but it's sixth. Again, once conference play begins and you're facing tougher competition, those numbers will inflate. It's just about where you ultimately finish in the league. So Carlos, to review the defense, a couple preseason predictions you and I made that we'll get into here. We said Francisco Mauinoa would lead the team with tackles. I said 85. You said 88. Maui Goa leads the team with 32 tackles. Wesley Basaint is 27th. Um, Tackles for loss. I said Ruben Bain would have 15 to lead the team. You agreed with me. Tyler Barron leads the team with 7.5. Obviously, Ruben Bain has really only played one game and three snaps of another. So that's
Yep.
part of the reason why that's that. And then sacks, I said Ruben Bain would lead with 7. You agreed with me. Tyler Barron leads the team with 4.5. Simeon Barrow is next with 3.5, and Elijah Alston next with 2.5. And then in terms of interceptions, you went with Damari Brown leading the team. He's barely played, obviously,
Yeah.
because of an injury. We won't see him. And then I said Deani Hill would lead the team in picks because he would be the one targeted in coverage. Well, he's been targeted in coverage. He just hasn't gotten any picks to this point. Mish Powell leads the Hurricanes with 3 interceptions. So to wrap up and put a bow on defense, what needs to change here in the second half?
I think they need to start incorporating a little bit more zone. I think they need to obviously maybe. I think they did it a little bit against Cal. They started bringing down a little bit more three down line looks and bringing Alston as sort of that jack backer, moving him around the line of scrimmage. I think they need to do some of that more of that stuff to create more pressures because that's really ultimately where it is. There's nothing you could do to improve that secondary. I don't think, other than playing a little bit more zone and giving some zone pressures and trying to get to the quarterback as much as you can because that's your strength. Get to the quarterback, disrupt the passing game, and make tackles. Ultimately, I think that's what they have to do. If you're going to play zone, if you're going to play off and let guys catch the ball in front of you, you got to finish with tackles, right? You got to bring them down as soon as you make contact. That's got to be the key moving forward.
Yeah. All right. One last thing to get to here before we get to your mailbag. We ranked Miami's opponents in the preseason, easiest to toughest. And I think we need to probably fix that order just based on what's happened in the ACC,
And
Carlos.
to be fair, nobody expected this sort of flip-flop, right?
No, there's some teams here we did not expect to see fall off this way. But in the preseason, we had FAMU, the easiest opponent, Ball State next, Wake Forest third, Duke fourth, Syracuse fifth, USF sixth, Georgia Tech seventh, Virginia Tech eighth, Cal ninth, Florida 10th, Florida State 11th, and Louisville 12th. I think we should drop Florida State from that spot there,
Yeah, yeah,
Carlos.
I would think so.
Um, when you look at the opponents here, the backstretch, how would you rank what's ahead? Louisville the toughest opponent left on the schedule right now, or would you put somebody else ahead of the Cardinals here? We've got Syracuse, we've got Georgia Tech, a trip to Georgia Tech, we've got Duke at home, got Wake Forest at home, and then we've got that trip to Syracuse. So where would you, if you had to rank those six in order, what would you rank it now?
Yeah, Louisville coming off two losses and the way they've looked, to me, I'd move them down a little bit. I think maybe the way things have gone this season, you're probably looking at, I don't know if it's Syracuse or Georgia Tech maybe, but I think in terms of talent, Louisville is obviously the most talented team they have left on this roster in terms of on the schedule, in terms of who they're going to be facing. That game I think is going to end up being a shootout. I think Louisville is going to be able to score points on our defense, and I think we're going to be able to score points on theirs. I think ultimately that's going to be a game that ends up like 41-38, so it's going to be another tight one. I think Syracuse's ability to score points also, and their quarterback play is concerning, and their defense is not as bad as we thought it was going to be.
Right.
So that's bumping them up a little bit. And I think Duke, obviously, surprisingly, the way they've played this season, they're not great on offense, but they're playing really well on defense. So that gives them a shot. And Georgia Tech, their defense also is playing very well. So that's those three teams to me are the ones, Louisville, Georgia Tech, and Duke, that are going to be the toughest uh, to play remaining. FSU has just dropped off the map. And, as much as I think it's a rivalry game and they're going to be up for it, ultimately, I think by the time that game rolls around, they've quit on the season. Wake Forest is better than we thought they were going to be, but their defense is just nowhere near what it needs to be able to hang with the Hurricanes. And their offense is okay, and they're going to give them some problems, I'm sure, with that slow mesh, but it's not going to be what they need to be able to stop this team from just engulfing them.
Yeah, Louisville, I think, is still the toughest opponent. We've got them fifth in our power rankings. They've got to play Virginia this week. Virginia's 4-1, which is kind of a surprise how well Virginia has played. Syracuse is next in our power rankings, the Athletics ACC power rankings in terms of opponents. Georgia Tech after them, Duke, Wake Forest, and then Florida State. We've actually gotten last place in the power
Oof.
rankings, and I agree with you. I think emotionally, the way that team has just sort of gone through a 1-5 season and the level of disappointment, the injuries that they've had. I compiled a list. This is the Florida State fan in me. I compiled a list
Of course.
of several statistical categories this season that Florida State is last in the ACC. And should we go through it?
Let's do it. That will be music to my ears. Let me hear it.
Scoring offense, 17.8 points per game, dead last. Yards per play, 4.52, dead last. Explosive plays of 20 yards or more, last with 20. Completion percentage, last, 53%. Touchdown passes, last, 6. Quarterback pressures allowed, last, 58. Rushing yards per game, 58, last. Per carry, 2.16, last. Rushing yards allowed per game, 182, last. Third down defense, 46%, last. Turnover margin, -6.
I never thought I'd hear those sort of statistics coming from Florida State midway through the season, but it makes me salivate for that game now because it could be worse than that game, that 2020 game where they just got demolished by the Hurricanes at Hard Rock. If the Canes get up like 14-0 early in that first quarter against Florida State, that game is going to just snowball as guys start hitting the portal midway through the game for the Seminoles, and Miami just starts smashing them. Uh, and somebody's gonna have to
Midway
come in.
through the game, you're going to see
Yeah, guys just taking off.
somebody's going in the portal. Yeah.
Twitter's gonna be lighting up. This guy just hit the portal. This guy just hit the portal, and then they may even just cross over to the other sideline, right? They might just hit the portal and be like, "Hey, listen, I'm available." And Mario's gonna be like, "Oh, hey, listen, around the corner, locker room's that way."
Yeah, it's gonna be unbelievable. I really and I'll say this just to talk about another rival, Florida. Big win by them last week against UCF. I thought Billy Napier would be out of a job by the UCF game. That was my prediction in the preseason, and they're 3-2, and they've turned it around a little bit. Now they're not going to beat Tennessee this week,
Yeah,
especially
no,
with Tennessee coming off a loss, but all things considered, you go back and you look at that Florida game now, they're 3-2. They beat UCF. Maybe it was a pretty good win. In fact, if you go to the ESPN FPI, Carlos, the Football Power Index, Virginia Tech, number 28, Florida, number 36. Those are Miami's top two wins in terms of opponent. Their strength of schedule is 64th. Miami's to this point. The remaining schedule 52nd. So I know people are going to criticize and say, "Oh, they haven't played anybody." Well, hey, look, the Gators are a top 40 team, and Virginia Tech's a top 30 team according to the Football Power Index.
yeah, and Gators are gonna end up with like 5 wins at most. I think they're gonna start getting throttled the rest of the season, starting with this coming week against Tennessee. So, especially since it's at Tennessee, right?
It is at Tennessee, yes.
Yeah, they're gonna get throttled. I think what you're gonna be looking at moving forward is obviously the Hurricane schedule is going to be a little bit tougher. It's not the toughest in the country, but ultimately they're probably going to face Clemson, which is a lot better than people anticipated after that opening loss to Georgia in the ACC championship game. That'll be a legitimate opponent. If they win that and win the ACC championship and get that bye, it'll be well earned. Then once they get in the playoff, man, they're gonna have to bring it every week. So if they're gonna win a national championship, there's no like sort of discussion as back in the day when you'd have the AP voting somebody and the UPI voting somebody as a national champion. They have to earn it on the field. So ultimately, it doesn't matter what their strength of schedule is. If they get the bye, they get into the playoff, they're gonna have to earn it.
I agree. I'm 100% with you. I think right now, if Miami and Clemson were to meet in North Carolina, I don't know that I could pick Miami to win that game based on the way Clemson has played the last few
Right.
weeks as an offense. But I will say this because I did break Clemson down. I broke the whole ACC down, Carlos. Here's some Clemson numbers. They are ranked 11th in the ESPN Football Power Index. Their toughest opponents to this point, Georgia, who's number 4 in the FPI, and Florida State, who was 67th. They haven't played a very tough schedule outside of Georgia either. So for people who are,
Yeah.
just riding Clemson's coattails, yeah, App State is not very good. NC State is not very good. Um, let's see
And the
what
best
happens.
opponent on our schedule that's left is maybe South Carolina, right?
Well, they've got Wake Forest this week at Wake Forest. They've got Virginia. Then they've got to host Louisville. They got to go to Virginia Tech and at Pitt. Pitt is undefeated right
That's
now.
right. Pitt is good. All right.
And
We'll see.
Virginia Tech, I would say, if this is the new Virginia Tech, the one that showed up and played against Miami, I would give Virginia Tech a shot at home at Lane Stadium to win that game. Would you
Yeah,
not?
Virginia's playing well, so we'll see. They've got a tough schedule down the stretch.
Yeah, Virginia, Louisville, Virginia Tech, Pitt. That's a decent 4 game stretch.
And South Carolina at the end.
And South Carolina, who's 35th at the end. But some numbers here for Clemson, who is Miami's biggest potentially opponent left on the schedule if they meet in the ACC championship game. They're fourth in the ACC in scoring offense, 39 points per game. This surprised me. They're 10th in scoring defense, Carlos, 23 points per game. Their yards per play, 7.12 is fourth. Uh, that's yards per plays allowed on defense is 10th, 5.56 yards per play. Third down, they're 11th in the ACC in third down offense. 11th, 38.7%. Red zone touchdown percentage, Carlos. This was eye-opening to me. Because this was a big stat that affected them last year. They're 16th in the ACC in red zone touchdown percentage. They're still kicking
Oh,
too many field goals. 45% in the red zone. They're scoring a lot of their touchdowns on big plays. And they are right now +7 in the turnover margin. That is what's helping Clemson look better than they are. Any of those numbers open your eyes that I just finished telling you?
yeah. The amount of points they're giving up on defense per game to me is a little surprising. I thought they were a little better defensively. And like you said, they're scoring on big plays, and if they don't get big plays, they're not finishing drives in the red zone. Which obviously, if even if you get turnovers, if you get it on the other team's half of the field, if you can't put it in the red zone and score touchdowns, eventually you're going to lose to a team like Miami. If you're playing an explosive offense and you can't finish drives, it's like we've said, it's like Jordan, right? You put it up 40 times a game, he might be cold quarters 1 through 3, but if he starts hitting shots in that fourth quarter and gets hot, doesn't matter if he shot 30% for the game, he's going to score 20 in the fourth.
Right, right. Let's get to the mailbag, Carlos, because I got a lot of questions in here. I sent the alert out at 10:21, and you and I started recording not too long after that, and we're getting close to an hour of conversation here. So let's dive into the mailbag. This is from Michael Bonassar, M Bones 12. He says this is a hot take. Not taking the portal into account, the drop off at wide receiver from this year to next is going to be more impactful than the drop off at quarterback. Do you
No,
agree or disagree?
I totally disagree. You've got Josiah Trader, you've got Isaiah Horton coming back, you still got Ray coming back. You've got guys that you could plug in there at wide receiver that I think are going to be fantastic. Obviously, it's Xavier Restrepo's been an incredible player for this program, but I think there are other guys that can step up and do different things. You are not going to find Cam Ward in the transfer portal next year. You're not. I mean, there's nobody like him probably going to be available in the portal. Even if it's DJ Lagway, he's going to take time to develop into something like that if he ever gets there. So there's going to be a huge drop off at quarterback next
By the way, I don't mean to
year.
crap on Miami's receivers, but how many of those guys are NFL receivers right now?
uh, I'd say Restrepo and Horton just from his size and ability.
Right. You should be able to replace 2 NFL receivers at Miami every year. I
Yeah.
don't think you have 4 or 5 NFL receivers in
And
that
you're
group right
talking
now.
about replacing the potential #1 pick in the draft at this point, right? The way
Well,
he's
a
playing
first round, you're potentially listen. I
at
talked to
quarterback.
scouts at the last home game, and 3 of them told me Cam Ward's going to be a top 3 quarterback chosen, and every year you have about 4 or 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round. So somebody is going to take Cam Ward in the first round, whether he's first, whether he's 25th, it's irrelevant. You have a first round quarterback, and I don't know what round any of those receivers go in.
And historically, it's harder to replace a first round quarterback, let alone a top 5 pick quarterback. When was the last time Miami even had a first round quarterback?
Yeah,
Right.
any
So that,
Testaverde.
yeah, exactly. So it's a huge drop off next season at quarterback.
And Emory Williams could be a very good college quarterback. Who knows what he develops into? But I am 1000% convinced Miami will be looking in the portal to find another Cam Ward. And if
Yeah.
Mario finds one, I don't even know that one exists. You look around the rest of college football right now. Who do you take? Right?
To
Maybe
me, it's
Karen.
DJ Lagway. If you can get DJ Lagway away from Florida,
Right.
I think
And
that's the guy.
and I think there's a chance they could. I mean, I'm not saying this on any reporting level. I'm just saying that based on what could happen at Florida, like you said, if they have a
Yep.
really bad second half of the season, I think Miami is certainly a player. And I think the one thing Cam Ward has done is given Miami a chance to land some special quarterbacks in the portal. That was a big storyline you and I talked about in the preseason. Cam Ward needs to be elite so that Miami can continue to replenish that quarterback position. The problem is Cam Wards don't grow on trees.
Right. And if we're looking at this season right now with somebody else at quarterback, right?
They don't.
Uh,
There's probably two losses.
there's probably two losses.
Yep. We're having an entirely different show right now,
Yeah, we're having
and
a show we've had for the last 4 years.
we're talking about an 8-4, 9-3 team.
Right.
All right, let's get to Nick Strong, KY Kane 23. He asked me, "Will you be in Louisville for the game? I can't wait to see my Canes beat my hometown Cards. Go Canes." Nick, I don't know that I will be going to Louisville. It just depends on what the Athletic wants. I think had Louisville won against SMU and was still ranked, I think I could certainly make a strong argument to make that trip. I think at this point, staying home, watching the games on TV, covering them from the seat of my couch and being able to write about other games, which is what the Athletic has me do. I've written about Florida, I've written about other schools, Florida State, UCF, whatever the big story is usually what I end up having to do.
Yeah, or it may
So
be on my couch until the Hurricanes get down and big enough where I have to kick him out of the house.
right, right. I don't know. I think Louis. Initially I wanted to go to the Louisville game. At this point, I don't know that I will. It just depends on what the Athletic is planning and where they want to put people at. There's a lot of big games across college football, and I don't just cover the Canes anymore. So. All right, this is from Jessica JK Miami 89. She says, "Why do you think Mark Fletcher's having so much more success in the run game than Damian Martinez right now? I suspect based on how many of them wind up with long NFL careers, we ask a lot of our backs, are we running more complicated schemes than he was at Oregon State?" Carlos, I think you're right. I think he is waiting too long to hit the hole.
Yeah, it's not that we're running more complicated schemes, but I did remember I said before the season started, I think Martino was going to have an adjustment period because it's a different type of running scheme. I think
Yeah,
they did run a little bit more zone at Oregon State than they're running here, and that's the kind of zone like the outside wide zone where you have to be a little bit more patient to
yeah.
let the runs develop. And they're going a little bit more gap schemes with Fletcher than Martinez to this point, just to help because that's his strength and that's where he feels more comfortable. And they're trying to make Martinez a little bit more comfortable at running more zone stuff. So 65% of Mark Fletcher's runs this year have been gaps, as opposed to Damian Martinez, which has been 56%. So it's almost a 50-50 split for Martinez. But I think Jessica's right. You're seeing a little bit different style for this Miami team in terms of how they like to run the football as opposed to what Oregon State used to do. It's not more complex. It's just different, and the running back tracks are different in terms of the way you attack the line of scrimmage and the patience you use to get into that line of scrimmage and hit the hole. So, and again, listen, this is the second week in a row Jessica comes up with great questions because she came up with some great ones last week too.
By the way, I don't want to crap on Damian Martinez just because he doesn't have 500 yards rushing. I think one thing we have to take into account here is the adjustment that he's making to this offense, as you noted. I think the second aspect is he's sharing the workload. Like they are giving other guys opportunities to carry the football. He's not getting a big number of carries per game, and I think part of that is by design. Mario knows this is a long season. If you're going to make a deep playoff run, you are going to be playing 14, 15, 16 games this year and keeping guys fresh. It's an approach maybe that most of us don't necessarily like because you want your best players to get all the touches, right? We sit there and watch the game. We're like, oh, this guy's hot. Keep going to him. Keep going to him, right? I just think you have to think differently when it comes to football because it's a sport of attrition. And I think that's why we haven't seen Jalen Rivers come back. He probably could have come back a week or two ago, but in the end, Mario's like, we can beat Cal with Markel Bell at left tackle. We can beat Virginia Tech with Markel Bell at left tackle. We can survive. This is a long season. So I think coaching decisions in terms of rushing guys back from injuries is different nowadays because college football has a 12-team playoff.
Yeah, and I think you have the luxury of having that many backs because you're not only talking about Mark Fleischer and Damian Martinez. You've got AJ Allen, you've got Jordan Lyle, you got Chris Johnson. You've got a stable of guys that you can go to back there that provide different things for the Hurricanes. And you
Mhm.
can sort of pick the hot hand, like you said, and ride that guy a little bit more than the other. My concern is not that Damian Martinez, his overall production isn't where it should be. It's the per carry numbers and seeing him not attack that line of scrimmage. It's a trend that we've seen over the last 6 games and we've seen more production out of other guys when they've gotten the carries. So that to me is why I think they're going with a little bit more Mark Fletcher over the last couple weeks.
Marcus Williams, Money Cane. Does the staff get credit for adjustments made to come back from down double digits in the second half the past two games, or is it more of a concern that they got down that big in the first place? Carlos, I don't blame the coaching staff for getting behind in either of those games. When I think of the Virginia Tech meltdown, I think of in terms of them blowing the lead, I think of the bad call on the holding penalty against Markel Bell, the interception by Cam Ward, and then poor tackling on defense. They had 20, what was it, 22 missed tackles in that game. Francis Marino, we just finished talking about it. The number of missed tackles that he had. They didn't do a good job wrapping up Tootin in when he was running the football. And then with Cal, he had 5 plays of 40 yards or more. I didn't see them getting taken advantage of in terms of Lance Guidry's play calling. I saw guys that blew assignments.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think you've got guys blowing assignments, but I also think these two teams came in with a game plan that they knew what they wanted to attack and how they wanted to attack it. And you saw it specifically with Cal really coming into that game because they had plays drawn up that hit big that took advantage of exactly what they were looking to take advantage of.
Hmm.
My concern is going into these games. I think the last two games they were out schemed early on. I don't think they
I
were ready.
agree that you could say that. That's fair.
They were out schemed early on. I think late in the games, you see the adjustment of the defense being able to get pressure. I think up front is what's made the difference. The
Right.
defensive line taking over and giving that secondary a bit of a break. And I think offensively, ultimately, it's Cam Ward, man. When he puts
Yeah.
that cape on and he decides, listen, we're going to take over. And like I said, he's checking plays at the line of scrimmage late. You'll see early in the games, he's not checking as much. When he's
Yeah.
checking late is when they start making those plays. Ultimately, they get the job done. I don't know how much of it is coaching staff or how much of it is, the players themselves making it happen. I think it's a good split between the two. I think the secondary is not making enough plays. The defense isn't making enough plays, but I also think they were out schemed early on.
Rusty Sedaris, R. Sedaris on Twitter says, "Can the Canes fix these issues that have had them in these dogfights, or is this just who they are, and we should get ready for some losses?" Well, Rusty, I think getting Jalen Rivers back on the offensive line is going to help Cam Ward in terms of pass protection, which could help the offense overall, right? When you have better pass protection,
Yep.
and he doesn't have to worry about taking a sack or trying to extend the play because guys are on top of him. That's going to help the offense as a whole. I think if you can get Damari Brown back in the secondary, that'll help.
Yep.
Ruben Bain being healthy
That's huge.
helps. Yeah, I think. But is this who they are? Yeah, I think they're a team that's good enough to win the ACC. Um, Bad enough on defense to be in shootouts because they don't have guys in coverage that I trust, and good enough to win a playoff game. I think that's what they are. I don't think they're good enough to win the national championship. I think Cam Ward can get hot and potentially lead them to one if he's like playing like he did over the last 20 minutes of that football game against Cal. But if he is off or he throws a pick or he's struggling, they're not going to beat elite teams. They're just not. They're not going to beat an Ohio State. They're not going to beat an Alabama or Georgia or Texas because those teams are deeper and a little bit more well-rounded than this Hurricanes team. That doesn't mean they can't beat them. I'm just saying I personally wouldn't go into that game feeling confident that Miami's going to beat those teams.
Right. And I think, like you said, I think having Ruben Bain back is going to make a huge difference to help continue to create pressure on quarterbacks, which is going to help that secondary. I think Damari Brown coming back is going to help. Jalen Rivers, like you said, is going to help. And I think the key to me down the stretch is going to be can they run the football better and rely on that a lot more to be able to take the pressure off Cam Ward. Because if you're
Mhm.
struggling early on, like you have the last couple of weeks, if you play a really good opponent and you get too far behind and their defense is good enough where they can sustain it, it's going to be hard to come back. I think if you're able to run the football, you create a little bit more for the defense to be concerned with, and
Yeah,
it lets Cam Ward sort of not have to feel like he has to make a play on every throw, right? And
yeah,
just take what the defense gives him, because that's where we've seen Cam get into trouble a little bit, trying to force the ball into places where maybe he shouldn't force it because he feels like he needs to make a big play, rather than taking what the defense gives him and throwing underneath, which is what they did in the second half. He started chipping away by
yeah.
throwing underneath. Yeah, he made some big time throws and make big time plays, but a lot of it was just taking what was there and what was available.
You just got to make those smarter decisions and put the Brett Favre down, every now and then. Just understand the situation, understand that your teammates may not be able to pick you up down the stretch, right?
Mix
And
in a
and
little Chad Pennington, right?
yes, yeah, take what you can get ahead and win the game comfortably instead of, being the cardiac canes every week. All right, David Hernandez, D. Hernan says, "What are some depth chart changes you would like to see happen after the bye?" Well, one, Jalen Rivers back at left tackle. If you can get Damari Brown back at some point, that would be helpful. I think Ryan Rodriguez at left guard. Not that Matthew McCoy has played terribly, but I think there's a reason the coaching staff felt better about Ryan. I think they run the ball better with him in there. Um, I don't know that you have any other personnel changes you can make. And that's
Yeah.
the thing that people are sort of what that doesn't make me giggle. I'm not
I don't
laughing
know if
at you.
Sam Brown's ahead of Isaiah Horton on the depth chart, but I'd like to see that ultimately change.
That could be one, but the personnel is the personnel to this point.
Yeah. I think
I
it's
don't.
more about snaps than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Zaquan Patterson, if he figures things out and he has a better grasp of the defense, right? We've seen OJ Frederick out there starting games, a freshman. Maybe more of these younger guys that we don't see as much get more opportunities, but they got to earn it. And
Yeah.
I trust this coaching staff to put the right guys out there. I don't sit here very often and say they're playing the wrong guy.
Right. And I don't anticipate, Francisco Manoa playing poorly enough to be benched in favor of Popo Aguirre or somebody else. I think he can figure it out. So I think some of the guys that maybe aren't playing as well as they should, maybe they figure it out. I think the bye week is going to be huge in terms of corrections, film study, and being able to make adjustments to what's been going on thus far. We'll see, man. I don't think there's going to be too many changes in the depth chart. I think ultimately what you want to see is some more snaps for some other guys. So maybe some of the starters giving away a little bit in terms of their snap counts to other guys.
Yeah. All right. This one's from Lowkey T305, Mama's oldest boy on Twitter. How y'all feel about the new rule of no letter of intent anymore for signing day? Seems like all your predictions are coming true this year. All right, Loki. I would say this. I don't think it's a big deal. It doesn't matter what they sign. It just matters what school they're at, and what NIL deal they get. That's what it's come down to. I told you guys that this would come down to money. We're going to see, I think, eventually down the road here with some of the developments of the House versus the NCAA and them being able to pay players. We'll figure out what system they ultimately go to. But in the end, the best players are want to continue to go to the best programs that help them get to the NFL and make the most money. And whether or not that includes signing of a letter of intent is irrelevant. Um, but it's we're going to continue to see college football evolve. I hope for Miami's sake that in the next 5 years they get into the Big Ten conference because I think
Well,
that's
hey,
where they're going to end up. And
have you seen the proposal for the new Super League potentially made by this?
yeah,
In-
I don't think that's going to happen, Carlos. I don't think the SEC and the Big Ten are going to just let that happen. Um, there are contracts that have been signed. Maybe after those TV deals are done and the Super League can come up with even more money for these universities to do that and to ditch some of the other schools on the lower end, right? The Rutgers and the Vanderbilts of the world, even though Vanderbilt just beat Alabama, the schools that don't have the brand name recognition, maybe we get to that point, but it's not happening anytime soon, in my opinion.
well, they're talking about having that four-tiered model, sort of like the Premier League and all these
Yeah,
other leagues that they do in soccer, where they relegate teams depending on their performance, and that the revenue splits for the tiers are going to be different, and that the ultimately the top tier teams are going to get more than even
right.
the SEC and Big Ten are currently contributing, and there's going to be allocation of funds for either cutting down the TV contracts or consolidating those contracts after a couple years. So it's enticing, it's intriguing. I think a lot of the teams that Dan Radakovich said he liked the idea. I thought it was the best possible model moving
Yeah.
forward. If they get it done, it'd be exciting for college football because you're going to see a lot more intersectionality and more big time blue blood programs interacting with one another.
Carlos, there's a long way to go, and I'm gonna just say this. The NFL made a deal with college football a long time ago to not have two professional systems in place. The day that college football goes to an NFL Super League model, I mean the NFL, college football goes to an NFL Super League model, the NFL is going to have a problem with it. And there's going to be a very interesting set of legal battles ahead. And I think people don't think about these things because they're not sports writers and it's their job, not their job to think about it. I think we can all sit here and talk about, hey, this is where college football is trending. Right now, the SEC and the Big Ten have the TV contracts, they have the history, they have schools and a lot of billionaires and people behind them. If this Super League is going to happen, there's some super battles ahead, I think, with the NFL. And I think people need to think about that in the back of their minds because you're not going to have two professional football leagues in America, not two real professional football leagues in America. All right. This question is from Sam Knowlton. The entire season depends on beating Louisville, one loss, and we could be out of the ACC championship with Clemson and SMU going instead. Am I wrong? Sam, you're not wrong.
You're not.
Uh, I think we've mentioned this on previous
You're wrong in the
podcasts.
sense that it depends on Louisville because we've seen it doesn't have to be Louisville. It could be anybody left on the schedule.
Here's what I'll say. I broke down the entire ACC. I wish I could just share my spreadsheets with you guys. All the effing information that I looked up. It could be easier. I wouldn't have to talk about it.
Hey,
But
listen. Don't give the cow away for free, right? Make them buy the milk.
SMU 5-1, 2-0 in the ACC. They're 18th in the Football Power Index. They're two toughest opponents to this point, Louisville and BYU. We went over Clemson, so I'm not going to go over Clemson again. But their toughest opponents at this point, Louisville, who they beat, BYU, who's undefeated, Big 12 leader, who they lost to, top 40 team. They've got Stanford. SMU's got Stanford at Duke, Pittsburgh at home, Boston College at home, at Virginia, and Cal left on the schedule. I think there's a chance they could run the table and finish undefeated against that schedule. I think they could win at Duke. I certainly think they could beat Pittsburgh at home, although I think that'll be a great game the way
Yeah,
Pittsburgh has looked to this point. I think they could certainly lose to Boston College. Thomas Castellanos is a top 10 quarterback in the ACC. And Virginia, give them credit, Virginia to this point is unbeaten in the league at 2-0. Um, they beat Boston College. They stopped a good running quarterback. Their defense is halfway decent. But of all the teams, SMU is the one that I worry about the most. I think Pittsburgh's schedule is probably a little bit too tough when you start looking at who else could potentially sneak into the ACC championship game. Pitt is 5-0, 1-0 in the ACC. They've got Cal at home this week. That's not an easy game. They've got Syracuse at home the following week. They're at SMU. They're home for Virginia, home for Clemson, at Louisville, and at BC. I think every one of those
they're
teams
probably
has
gonna lose at least two of those.
every one of those teams has a winning record. BC's 4-2, Louisville's 3-2, Clemson's 4-1, Virginia's 4-1, SMU's 5-1, Syracuse is 4-1, and Cal is 3-2. So I mean, every opponent on Pittsburgh's schedule is unbeaten. So will Miami get in the ACC championship game if they lose one game? I think it's possible, but the team I worry about, you're right, it is SMU.
And listen, once the Florida Gators fire Billy Napier, because they're gonna fire Billy Napier, if they don't land Lane Kiffin, dude, Pat Narduzzi. Pat
Uh, he
Narduzzi does one hell of a job at Pitt.
he really does. And you think about where they were a year ago at 3-9, such a horrible offense. Basically goes out and hires uh Caden Bell, former Gators quarterback son to be the offensive coordinator, and they just blow up. And they've had a great year to this point. So Pitt's been a great story, but I think their schedule is a little bit too tough. I think Virginia will lose a game, even though they're unbeaten in the ACC. So it's still wide open. And I'll say this: keep your eyes open for Virginia Tech, because Virginia Tech, when you look at the way that their season has gone to this point, they lost to Vanderbilt, they lost to Rutgers by a field goal at home, they lost to Miami in controversial fashion. They're 3-3, but their remaining schedule, they've got BC at home, they've got Georgia Tech at home, they've got a trip to Syracuse. They host Clemson. That's a huge game, Carlos. That might be the best game left in
Yeah,
the ACC slate. And then they're at Duke and then home for Virginia. Everybody left on Virginia Tech's schedule are teams that they could leapfrog in the standings. And if SMU loses a game down the stretch and Virginia Tech stays with one loss, we might see a Miami Virginia Tech rematch in the ACC championship.
that would scare the living shit out of me now.
Just this is going to be fun. This is what's fun about, not having divisions and you don't know what's going to happen. And
Hey, and that Vanderbilt loss now looks a hell of a lot better, doesn't it?
it really does. It really, really, really does. No question. All right, let's get to the next question. This is from Armando Izaguirre, AY2 Mondo. Is it more encouraging that the team can lock in and play nearly perfect to come back from big in the last two games, or more concerning that they keep digging themselves in holes? For me, it's more encouraging because this happens every year in 2 to 4 games, and we used to come up short. Armando, it's encouraging because go back to the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Every year, Miami had a game that they crapped the bed against an inferior opponent, and they came back to win. Great teams find ways to
Yep,
win games. You are not going to show up and play great every single week. You are not going to dominate every single team that you face. The 2001 team, arguably the greatest team ever, had some close calls,
that BC game.
right? Virginia Tech at the end of the season was not an easy game either. That was a shootout. Um, so the point here is if you have a special quarterback who can lead you back from a 25-point deficit, just savor that because that
Yeah.
does not happen often.
Anybody in college football can get got. Look at Alabama last week. Look at Tennessee last week. Look at all the teams that fell last week to inferior opponents or supposedly inferior opponents. It's just a game of attrition when you get into conference play. Conference play is different than preseason play, right? Non-conference play. Um, and when you have teams now that can come back for you that have the not only the talent but also the mental makeup that could sustain being down most of the game and fight their way back, that's something special.
For sure. All right, we're gonna try to sift through this as quickly as possible because we're running long on time here, Carlos. This is from Champa Bay Kane. He says he went to the Miami Hurricane Sports Hall of Fame last weekend. Great idea on things to do in Miami. Thank you. Thank you for listening, Champa
On
Bay
your
Kane.
recommendation, good job, Manny.
My recommendation was taken well there. This is from Jason Real Hip Hop. Louisville is one of the teams that completely out schemed us offensively last year. Do you believe the Canes will be ready for the challenge
I don't
after
think
the
so. Not
bye
the way
week?
they played the last couple weeks.
Yeah, I think you have to give respect to Louisville. Tyler Shuck is putting up really, really good numbers. I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves and continue to throw out numbers here, but Louisville lost that game in large part in the last couple of weeks because of turnovers. They had three against Notre Dame that hurt them badly, and then last week they had another one in the loss to SMU, who's one of the best at creating turnovers. Some numbers on Louisville, just for your perspective, Carlos. Close to 39 points a game on offense. Tyler Shuck is third in the ACC in QBR, 13 touchdowns, two interceptions. Corey Brooks is actually leading the ACC in receiving yardage. So he's having not receiving yardage, but receiving yardage per game. He's playing really, really well. Their issues, their offensive line has been giving up some sacks, or some pressures. They're eighth in pressures allowed, and their defense is 11th in opposing quarterback rating, which is not good. They're not creating as much pressure as they want. The toughest quarterback they face at this point is Haynes King from Georgia Tech, who's 25th in QBR. Um, I think it's a good sign for Miami they can win this game, but I think you're right. I think the defense is going to be the issue. Can they slow down Tyler Shuck and maybe
The
create a
bye
few
week helps,
turnovers? Yeah.
but I don't think I think Brom's going to have them ready on offense. It's going to be a shootout.
Yeah, I would expect Braum to be able to score some points on Miami. All right. This is from Tony Perez, Big Chilean 63. If Mario goes into the portal again next year for quarterback, will that hurt us with QB recruiting and the current QBs on scholarship? Yeah, I think Tony, every time you bring in a transfer quarterback, it leads to quarterbacks leaving. But I think that happens regardless. You could just take high school quarterbacks and quarterbacks will leave you. You can't worry about it year to year to year. You just have to have the right quarterback in there. You can try to groom one. You can try to have one ready in the wings like they're doing with Emory Williams. But Emory's got to go out there and perform. And if he doesn't outperform whatever transfer they get, odds are he's likely going to leave. And that's just the game it is now. That's the way college football is.
Yeah, and if you're recruiting elite quarterback talent, you know they either have to start as freshmen or as redshirt freshmen, or if not, they're going to hit the portal soon. So ultimately, you got to do what's best for the program. And right now, based on what they have on the roster coming back next season, I don't think maybe Luke Nichols is going to be necessarily ready to go right away. He's going to be a really good quarterback, I think.
Yeah,
And I don't think the guys they have behind Cam right now are going to be able to step in and provide that level of production. So if you can get a guy like a DJ Lagway, you go out and get him.
I agree. In the end, it's a year-to-year process with the transfer portal anyway. Guys are going to leave. You have to replace them. Good news is there's still a spring transfer portal window. I thought for a while there that it wasn't gonna happen, that they were gonna get rid of it. They shortened the transfer portal window in the winter. I decided to keep one in the spring. So it's 20 days in the winter, Carlos, and then 10 in the spring. So if you lose somebody in the spring transfer window, decides to leave like a quarterback, you can still replace them by going out and stealing somebody else's QB.
Yep.
There you go.
And
Uh,
Mario has become Mr. Steal Your Girl.
I think Miami's going to be stealing a lot of girls here in the coming weeks. They just stole UF's best recruit, the kid who lives right next down the street from me here at West Broward High School. So, a talented 6'4" receiver. You can look him up on Twitter. Uh, Rashawn954 asked thoughts on Mario's improvement on game management, like in the Cal game, going for two when they did, and managing the timeouts late, letting Cam have complete control of the offense. What do you think of Mario's game?
I don't think the clock
management.
manager was as great as people were saying it. I think it played out well, but I think we were
The
talking about,
result worked. The result
yeah,
worked.
the result. We talked about it. We're like, what is he doing with the timeouts here? What's going on here? The result ended up working. I don't think he did a good job managing the clock. I think that's still a weakness for him.
Yeah.
In terms of going for two, that's a chart. Like, I mean, okay, yeah, I'm glad he did it. It ended up working out, but that's just something you just look at the chart and say, okay, we go for two here.
I probably would have called timeout when Cal got the ball back. I probably would have called timeout with a little bit more than 2 minutes to go, but Mario
Yeah.
wanted to save all three in case they needed it. It worked out for them that Xavier's triple hit on that 70 something yard pass play, and they were
If
able to
they had
get
to
right
work
down
their
the
way down
field.
the
But
field, they would have been in trouble.
absolutely, I would have liked to have had more time then. But it is what it is, man. It just it worked out for them. Do I think he's completely over his clock management issues? You tell me at the end of the season. That's what it matters. All right. This is Young Bo. OBA got locks. How have you handled your beloved Knowles being so terrible this year?
Not well.
You know, listen, nobody thought they would be this bad, and it's been surprising, very surprising to me.
Manny's going to be like at that game when Florida State Miami is going to be so bad. I'm going to be yelling from the sideline. I'm going to be yelling in his ear like Apollo's trainer. Throw in the towel and Rocky Ford. Throw in the towel. Manny's gonna just gonna throw in the towel late, and it's gonna be too late. DJ Uyunglele is gonna be spread all over the field. The Florida State's gonna be down 50-0 at the half. Manny's gonna drive away in a Lamborghini, just thinking about what could have been. Listening to "There's No Easy Way Out." It's gonna be a rough game.
I gave you Florida State's rankings in a lot of categories. Do with it what you will. This is from Blaze BM Bresnahan. Love the show. What do you guys believe is the ceiling of this team as well as the floor the rest of this year? It's a good way to sort of wrap this up, Carlos, to wrap up this episode. What is the ceiling for Miami? If you had to make a positive, what is the best finish prediction and what is the worst finish prediction? What are you going with right now?
I think they make it to. I think they can make it to the college football semifinal.
Hmm.
Um, Depending on the opponent, maybe they sneak one in and get to the national championship game. I don't think they're good enough to win the national championship just because of the defense. Um, I think their floor is, second in the ACC. I think that's their floor.
Yeah, I think there's a chance they could lose one game in terms of floor. I think there's a chance they could lose one ACC game and not get to the ACC championship, which will put them on the playoff bubble. I think that's the floor. I think 11-1 right now is the floor. If Cam Ward gets hurt, all bets are off. But if Cam Ward is healthy, I think the ceiling for this team is to reach the national championship game. Whether or not they can win, it's all going to depend on matchups. I think it's going to depend on, who they have healthy at the
Yeah.
end of the season. If Ruben Bain and Jalen Rivers go down or they miss significant time over the second half of the year and aren't available for the playoffs, there's no way they're getting to the national championship game.
No,
But if those guys are fully healthy and Cam Ward is cooking, I think they can beat anybody in the country. And I said that before the season started.
I agree. Way to pat yourself on the back on the way out. I like it.
All right, that wraps it up for this week's Wide Right episode. Be sure to catch us next week when we come back and maybe take a closer look at the Louisville game. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for participating in the mailbag. Make sure you follow Carlos at MIA Ledo 305, right? Is that what we have there? What is the exact Twitter
MIA
ID?
Ledo. That's all it is. MIA
That's all
Ledo.
it is now. We changed it to MIA Ledo. All right. Make sure you subscribe to his podcast, the MIA All Day Pod. Make sure you subscribe to this one on YouTube or wherever you get it. And make sure you subscribe to The Athletic because I need subscribers.
Yeah, again, of course.
Gotta get that money, brother.
Get that money, bro. Listen, and I'm sure it's super cheap right now. So jump on it before it goes back up and you're paying what I'm paying.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week.
Peace.